Hi guys.
How are we? Back again?
Back again. Another week gone.
Mate, it's been a long week this week. I kind of felt every day. I think today coming in with the pouring rain, I felt all
Yeah, I didn't believe you. It's gorgeous morning when I left.
Yeah, no, it was when I looked out the window. By the time I got downstairs, it was just pouring with rain. But yeah,
Some days it rains, some days it pours.
Mm.
So,
I think I've heard that before. Yeah. So what are we doing today, Tom? How are you? Like, how was your week?
my week was alright. Actually, yeah, it feels like we're getting somewhere. And we are busy for our fantastic February.
Fantastic.
Make February fantastic. Or fabulous, depending on what you want. So we are doing lots of events. We've got some mead making courses. We've got some vermouth making courses. We've got some tastings, all kinds of stuff. So
we've got a new tasting bundle coming out as well.
Yeah.
Which is some of our mead of the month, some of our new meads coming up as well. So I think that comes up with about 8. Yeah, it's an exciting week.
Yeah, it's good. I just realised that and we've got a guest today.
We do indeed.
We've got Jonny Fowle, who's known as Wandering Whisky. And he'll be joining us to talk about whiskey and particularly oak aging. So I thought I'd chuck this in at the end of last week.
So it's a nice way to sort of have a look at playing with oak in fermentation, maturation. You know, that's kind of the overarching theme of today. Yeah, so it's kind of cool to see how that works in other industries as well as for us as well. You know, so I know in the whiskey industry that we've been working to create some mead finishing casks. For whiskey.
Mead finishing casks. So we have sent off some of our casks to a whiskey maker, distiller, to finish their whiskey.
Yeah, which would be
interesting to see what that's done actually. Yeah, it's been that last year, didn't we? So it must be coming up for.
Yeah, it takes some time, right? Like it's definitely a labour of love.
Yeah, exactly. Should we have a drink? I mean, you've already.
I started early already. It was 5 o'clock Sunday.
I just smashed through mine. That was a hopped mead for those that.
One of the older batches too. I just want
to check this.
I like any excuse to go through some old stock and just see how everything's holding up. So that's only 2 years old as it is, and yeah,
it's good. It's good. What are we starting on then? Well, should we start off with what we can this week?
So yeah, do you want to start off with that? Yeah, let's do this. So part of our. You want to go to small batch, or do you want to go?
Let's go Hackney first. So this has just come off the line this week. Today, hours ago, minutes ago. Yeah. So
this is one of our mead of the month ranges that we held off, and we decided to put in the new tasting bundle for this month. So this is I want to say 8%.
Yes, I think it is.
I want to say 8, or is it 9?
No, I think it's 8.
8% made with raw honey from the Hackney Marshes.
Awesome.
So this is a raw London honey fermented with our house yeast. Part of our Mead of the Month range. It's one of our single origins, of course. But yeah, it's
tasting good. I mean, I've tasted it before. Never in can. So yeah,
never in can.
Hackney Mead in can. And this is part of the tasting bundle.
This is also the same honey that we use for the Campai Cola.
So it draws it all together. Yeah. So if you want to get your hands on this is in this month's the February tasting bundle. So there's 8 meads in there this month. 4-pack one, our core range. This. And a couple of others, which I've forgotten. But yes, if you want to get involved with that, then do get involved. Guys, as always, if you've got any questions, then just type them in the box below and we will endeavour to answer them. Or hopefully Jonny can answer some questions about whiskey. We've got a few questions for you, Jonny, which have been sent through. So that's
I'm looking forward to this. This is a little bit different, a bit different setup than we usually do.
I think there's something I'd like to do a bit more of is invite some guests on to talk about booze in general, because I think people who are interested in our stuff are generally interested in a lot of other things.
I forgot how cool this is.
It's really cool, isn't it?
We didn't really talk about it. We on the nose, it is so much honey. It is terrifying amount of honey. It's also got that, if you get really raw honey, you get this nice sort of funky, sort of farmhousey sort of characteristic in the honey as well. And that really stuck when we started pushing that ABV up on these as well.
Yeah. It's not too sweet though. It's got a little bit of dryness.
No, so they're all finished about the same. With the Mead of the Month range, because that was kind of the idea, right? It was a honey that was meant to be showcased. So the fermentation style is around about the same. The sweetness always end up being the same, but the ABV, we varied, and that sort of helps with that drying. But also because it's slightly acidic, slightly floral, it kind of balances out quite nicely. But also, it's super herbaceous and floral on the nose.
Yeah, no,
it's a house yeast as well.
It's very easy for 8-9%. Right? It is terrifying easy. I'm having to actually slow myself down because, yeah, otherwise I'm going to really struggle.
Oh yeah, we've got an afternoon ahead of us.
We do.
So what have you been doing this week, Tom? Let's keep this rolling.
What have I been doing? Oh, we launched the Hawks collab.
Oh yeah.
So it has actually been quite a busy week. So the Hawks collabs, for those of you who don't know, it's half cider, half mead, a cider, if you will, and that is.
If you me, it's a cider. Otherwise, for everyone else, it's half mead, half cider.
I don't know. Whatever.
That's
live on the. That's all right. Let me leave the jokes to me. Well,
I do.
Or we can clear them.
Sometimes I get the confidence up, and then you just ram me back down.
No, so that launched on Wednesday, so that's cool. That's available on the Brewdog website, and we did that collaboration last summer, so it's really cool to see that come to fruition. We've actually got some other collabs coming up this year as well, which is exciting.
I'm looking forward to that. Like, I quite like our style of collab now. Like, we're kind of getting used to working with other breweries and other fermentationists, if you must, and we're starting to find our way with that. It was a little bit more difficult than I anticipated, but yeah.
No, that's really cool. What else have I done? I've been doing some social. For those of you that are communicating with me via the medium of Instagram, that's me. That's why it's just so zingy and exciting.
I have been enjoying it, Tom. It's.
Do you like it when I talk to myself?
I love it when you talk to yourself, and I also like it when you do it on Instagram. It's on. So there we go. Joke number 2.
Joke number 2.
Keep that one off. No, it's nice, and it's kind of it's very you, Tom. I'll give you that.
Exactly.
It's like seeing the inside of your brain.
Yeah, it's terrifying place.
It makes me respect you more.
Well, let's not go too far. Right, we're going to open. Are we going to open one more thing before we go to Jonny?
Let's do it. So, I'll be you. What have you been doing this week, Will? So this week I've been working on the small batch program. It's towards the end of the month. So the end of every month comes the packaging of the small batch program, ready to send out to our monthly subscribers, which is cool. So this month was the coffee boucher, which is this little darling here. These labels are nice though, Tom. I quite like these labels.
Who designed the labels well?
Was it February that did that? And
I just
bastardised.
I just took the colour out.
I'm just going to finish this up.
Do you want some water?
Yes, please. I've kept that one there clean for the whiskey. I kept you one there clean for the whiskey as well.
Nice. I mean, the whiskey is the...
We call it whiskey, but we specifically chose something that's a little off kilter.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the coffee boucher. So this is one of those ones that we've been working on for... I don't know, since I started here. I remember quite early on somebody saying that honey and coffee just don't work together. And I was like, well, I kind of want to see how that goes and why. And I started playing with it, and it's right. Like in a normal mead, like in a standard mead, let's say, it's quite difficult to incorporate coffee and have them, harmonise nicely. Usually, I've seen it in beer as well. It becomes really too tonal. Like they don't really mesh well, and over time it ends up.
Did you ever go to that beer festival called Uppers and Downers, which was where they made a load of coffee beers in London? I can't remember which. Anyway, it was like a series of breweries, and they basically paired up roasteries with brewers. There's some good stuff that came out of that, but I think it is one of those things that's more difficult, and you have to work with the roaster.
I've had more bad coffee beers than I've had good. And most of the good ones I've had have been stout orientated, or dark beer orientated.
That's true.
I had a couple of coffee red ales, and I thought that would be nice.
No.
Well, it could be, but the ones I had were just absolute pass.
I mean, so this is our coffee boucher. So this is made with caramelized honey as the base of the mead, and then some Brazilian. I can't remember the exact.
Pulp natural.
Pulp natural. What does
Which
that
is
mean?
that's the process of taking
the washing.
of getting to the actual taking the husk off and taking the fruit or the flesh off the outside and getting to the bean in the centre. So it's the fermentation process that all coffee goes through, and there's different styles of that fermentation process.
Maybe that's what we should talk about one week. A bit of coffee fermentation.
Well, I thought about that. We're going to do it. I was talking to the guys down at Old Spike who work with us in this. And we might get those on in a week or two and talk a little bit about coffee and go a bit further, because I really love this process. So something I've been working on for years. This is a barrel fermented barrel aged Boucher as well. We really like that style here, especially with the Boucher, the micro oxidization, get a little bit more of those sort of nutty characteristics, a little bit more chocolate comes out, a little bit more caramel comes through, and it's just a nice process to make a Boucher. And the Boucher itself with the caramelized honey has those like coffee, chocolate, caramel notes in it that really lend themselves well to, especially Brazilian coffee, which is, you know, the style of coffee that tastes and acts like coffee for me. You know, it's sweet and it's not too acidic, and it just has a beautiful nose of coffee.
Yeah, definitely. Johnny, if you're still on, if you want to just come into our Instagram live whenever you want, and then we'll invite you on.
Yeah, that tastes so nice too. So it's got all the coffee on the nose, but it's also, when it gets to the palate, it's got a nice little bit of complexity from that barrel. I will have to jump up to
I think actually you can invite it in. There is a way to do it.
Are you sending an invite anyway?
There we go. So we're going to be joined with Johnny. We'll leave him to introduce himself in a second, but he is a whiskey connoisseur, expert. And he will be here any minute. Hi, Johnny.
Oh, I'm on. Hey,
how's it going?
Yeah, good. Not too bad. I've been enjoying your chit chat.
Yeah, it's quite freeform, Johnny. It's a Friday afternoon.
I enjoyed the size of stuff. That was good.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I've been working on that one all week. It's nice it's like unscripted.
Johnny, what are you drinking?
I actually just got this. I didn't have anything in the fridge except for, I was given this by my friend Andrea at Milroy's. It's the Ardbeg Beer.
Oh.
So it's like, what's the name of the brewery who brewed it? It's Williams Bros in Alloa in Scotland. It's the peated malt that they use at Ardbeg Distillery, and they made a porter out of it. So it's like a smoked porter.
Oh, cool. How's it drinking?
Yeah, okay. So it's like, it's a smoky porter, but it's very very peaty, like whiskey peat, and it does taste a bit like if you go into a pub where like people have been having like a whiskey and beer session all day, and you get like the smoke and beer smell. It does taste a bit like the smell of that, which isn't like. It depends what you like.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's necessarily for me.
There's a time and place for everything. On the wrong day, that can be probably a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it's quite weird. Like for the first drink of the day, it's quite weird. It's all right.
So you can only go up.
Yeah. Well, I've got plenty to go. I've got about 1 million bottles of whiskey.
Yeah, you're well stocked. Johnny, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a bit about who you are and what you know about whiskey?
Okay. I'm Johnny. I went to school with Tom. I now work at Sotheby's as the whiskey specialist or spirit specialist. So I run the spirits auctions at Sotheby's in New York, London, and Hong Kong. So I get to deal mainly with the old and rare side of the industry. And every now and again, I get to drink some nice rare stuff. So hopefully I can show you guys a couple of interesting things. And I think we're going to talk about oak aging, bit of barrel aging, and I guess like anything that comes up.
Yeah, cool. I mean, we've got a few questions. We've also had a few questions submitted by our followers as well. And so, guys, if you have any questions as we go through, type them in the bottom, and then we'll keep a note of them, and we'll probably get to them towards the end. We are going to start off with the whiskey, and I apologise, Johnny, because I've been smashing through my whiskey collection, so I've only got this Balcon's Baby Blue.
Oh right, yeah.
Which is crucially, it's not a bourbon. As in, it hasn't been anything like that to be a bourbon. And I think
so it's not. I mean, it could be a bourbon, not a straight bourbon. Then I guess.
This specifically says on the back that it's not a bourbon.
Not a bourbon.
Which is when it came in, I straight away saw that, and I was like, okay, that actually makes it really quite intriguing. I was like, what process did they go to? They were like, no, we don't need that. We're just going to completely go our own way.
Yeah, it's too young to be a bourbon, apparently.
Right, less than 2 years. Yeah, I can't work out. Sometimes it's like it's whether the definition is straight bourbon or bourbon, whether you have to be aged for however many years. But yeah, it's generally 2 in the US. 3 in Scotland.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it's 3 years and a day in Ireland.
Yeah, same as Scotland, 3 in a day.
3 in a day, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll drink really for this. But yeah, this is corn whiskey as well, which is interesting.
Oh, well, that's probably why it's not a bourbon.
Oh,
so
corn. That's
yeah, you would have to have, well, so bourbon has to be majority corn, but it's generally a corn wheat mash bill.
Right.
But every now and again you get like corn rye, corn, various different things.
Yeah, because this is straight corn, so
straight corn, yeah.
Corn. Yeah, and it's blue corn as well, so blue maize, which is
anyway. So that's why it's at the back of my whiskey collection. You know, it's
oh shit.
Yeah.
I've got one American whiskey here. I've got a Russell's rye. I don't really drink that much bourbon. I occasionally drink rye, and this is like, I think it's around £100 a bottle, so it's not outrageously expensive. It's kind of normal, but it's this is really nice actually. I'd recommend this. Actually, it might be less. It might be more like £60. I can't remember how much I spent on this, but I'd really recommend Russell's 6. It's a good like easy drinker, 45%. It's pretty like, it is quite sweet, vanilla woody. I'd recommend it.
I sent you a question about what whiskies, what everyday whiskies we drinking. You said about the Glendronach, which is my favourite whiskey at the moment.
Yeah.
One actually I got Hector for Christmas, but yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Glendronach is so good. I actually bought, in fact, I've got one here. Oh, wait, where is it? I had one. Oh, here it is.
I feel like
this is one that
I'm going to knock over another bottle.
This is one, so if you go to the distillery, you can fill your own bottle.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you can see like the color on this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll put up a different colored whiskey next to it, where it's like here's a bourbon matured Colilla here, and that's the European oak sherry Glendronach hand fill. So it's like, yeah, really super dark. Delicious. Is this all going to be, if this gets recorded at some point, that may not be a very good, like for audio only, that may not be a very good segment.
Yeah, I mean, we forget ourselves sometimes.
No, that's fine. I think we make up for it in other areas, so it's a visual art piece.
Yeah, we can do more of the size of stuff, and then they'll get the audio guys on side.
They're just here for their humour, not for the content.
So I guess, Johnny, let's start from the beginning. What is whiskey? Let's start from basics. Okay,
so essentially it's a distilled beer. I mean, it's a grain spirit that you brew into, or it's a grain product that you brew into a beer, and then you will distill that beer. And you can distill it, I mean, it really depends who you are and where you're doing it, what your style is. Scotch whiskey is the most common whiskey, and you'll distill it twice. You make a kind of like a really heavy wine, like a 24%. They call it low wine, so that's like your first distillate. Which obviously, if you, I mean, that's not a spirit at that stage. So you distill that a second time. This is in pot distillation, which is, I guess, what's most common with whiskey. So you distill it a second time, and then you get a kind of 70-odd% spirit that'll be clear, and you'll water it down to around 65, 62.5 in the US, and then you stick it in a barrel for 2-3 years. So it'd be 2 in the US, 3 in Scotland, 3 in Ireland. In Japan, you can sort of do what you want, but they tend to go for 3 minimum. Mm-hmm. And then you got whiskey at the end. So yeah, but I mean, in essence, it's a distilled beer that's been aged in oak.
Yeah, and that's kind of it, because there is different variations in different countries, and different countries have their own rules, and it's kind of, you know, being bastardized from different things as well. And you talk about the American side, and you know, like wheat and barley are kind of the main ones, but going over to America, and corn being a lot easier, a lot more readily available, grows better in there. And you've got rye as well, as we talked about earlier on. You know, rye is one of those hardy grains that I love. Like, I like rye whiskey as well. I'm not much of a bourbon drinker. I have to really find the right bourbon. But rye whiskey, even though it's a little bit more, for me, like a little bit more alcoholic, you know, it has that sort of tendency to be a bit rougher and a bit more aggressive, but it also has like this nice spiciness to it as well. But yeah, otherwise, that's kind of whiskey in itself. So whatever grains are in that sort of area.
We spoke about it, about having been barrel and wood contact for a couple of years normally. What is that wood contact doing? And like, how is that changing? Obviously, is that, you know, I know the answer. Don't worry, guys. But I'll ask you the question.
Well, the wood contact. Well, first of all, it's going to give you the color.
Yeah.
And you really have to think about what kind of barrel you're using and how it's going to affect it. So the color will be darker or lighter, more intense or paler, depending on how new the barrel is, what kind of tree the barrel was made out of, and whether or not that barrel was used for something before you put whiskey in it. So the main types of whiskey barrel that you get, and I'm going to talk about Scotch whiskey mainly here because I think it's the one where you get slightly more experimentation. So in American whiskey, you'll use an American oak barrel. I mean, there are exceptions to this rule, but let's say like 99% of the time, it's a fresh virgin oak, American oak barrel. So we're talking about white oak that gets cut down in an American forest, and you you char it, which basically just means it's like toasting a marshmallow. You just put a flamethrower to it. You darken the inside, a bit like roasting a coffee bean, and then you stick your whiskey in it. So in the US, we're talking 2 years. When they're done with it, at the end of 2 years or however long they have it in the US, they then ship it over to America. God, what am I talking about? They then ship it over to Scotland or like Japan or whoever's going to use it next. Like in Scotland, we only really, there are of course exceptions, but we only really use wood that's been used by someone else before. I mean, the Scottish are famous for being thrifty, and the whiskey industry is a perfect example of that. So we will take like an old American oak barrel from a bourbon distillery. Often you cannibalize it to actually make the barrel even slightly bigger, called hogsheads, so you can fit more whiskey into it. So I mean, we're taking thrift to a new level. We're getting an old barrel, we're making it even bigger so you can fit more in it, and then you're going to sit that in your warehouse for a few years. Right. Sorry, say again.
It also gives you a less surface area, less contact for longer aging as well. If you're using a new barrel, that sort of, that contact of wood, if you spread it out, you get a longer sort of process.
Yeah,
it's a little bit more control.
Exactly. And you will find like you do get whiskies that are matured in tiny little, like you get Corsicans and Firkins and stuff. But yeah, generally the most common size is around 200 to 250 litres. And then so in Scotland, we're going to take it from America, from bourbon, or we're going to take it from Spain, from sherry, sometimes from Portugal, from port. Do you know what? I don't have any port winery whiskies, but there's like sweet wines I think I've got. So like, just to give you an example of the different types, this would be like a heavy sherry European oak. You get a dark color. I've got here a Japanese IPA barrel.
Nice.
And that probably was a bourbon barrel before that as well. I think it got used at the distillery as an ex-bourbon barrel. Then it got sent to the brewery. They used it to mature some whiskey barrel matured beer, and then they sent it back to the distillery. They used it again to make an IPA matured whiskey. Let's have a look. This is Amontillado Sherry, this one. It's not quite taken on the dark color, but it's sort of getting there. What else have we got here? Let's have a look. Oh yeah, I've got a Sauterne, so like French sweet wine.
Yeah, we do it in Australia as well. But there's a distillery called Starwood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Starwood do a lot of wine.
Australian style fortified wine, which is kind of cool. And that sort of idea of growing everything within that sort of country and using those sort of things. And those fortified wines just lend themselves to those sort of more sweeter notes as well, which kind of balance out with the whiskey, which is cool. And I did some stuff with port barrels last week, and port's one of those ones too. That round sort of fortified wine just gives you colour, gives you a little bit of this like perception of sweetness as well. And like with Scotland as well, with the how many bodegas there are now, and how scarce sherry barrels are moving towards these different styles of maturation as well is kind of driving that there's just not enough production of sherry to just keep running sherry.
Yeah, I mean, some people will produce sherry purely to season barrels with, which is kind of mad. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of how big the sherry matured industry for Scotch whiskey is, or for any whiskey company who's using sherry barrels.
Well, maybe we'll have to talk about sherry because that's one of my favourite.
Yeah,
and it's such good value. So you get such good wine.
Yeah,
cheap.
Yeah,
Tio Pepe, £7 a bottle.
Sherry's my favourite type of Scotch as well. Like a sherry finished cask or a sherry Scotch is when I tell people about what sort of whiskey do I get, I'm like, you're gonna have to try some different barrel types to kind of find what your niche is. You know, like I can't stand bourbon finish cask or bourbon barrel cask Scotch or Irish whiskey, and like I kind of learned that early on. I was like, I don't like that.
Wait, you don't like any bourbon matured whiskies?
Yeah, like
wow, that's like 90% of whiskey.
Yeah, like, and it's like, and I guess it's more that if it's not finished, if it's just done in bourbon, like I know they do a lot of bourbon early on, and then they'll move it into a porter or a sherry cask at the end and sort of clean that up. But if it's straight bourbon cask, I kind of find myself going, well, why don't I like this whiskey? I'm like, oh, it's 100% bourbon cask whiskey, and it's just one of those things.
So I don't know if you maybe, like, I kind of go through like different phases of being like I was obsessed with peaty whiskey, and I just found any other whiskey, like for quite a long time I just wasn't that interested in drinking a non-peaty whiskey. And then I had the same with like, I mean, I drink a lot of sherried whiskey, but now I've kind of like, I mean, it depends from day to day. But I think you go through phases of being like, do you know what, I don't like this, and then a minute later you're like, actually, this is the best.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Because I remember when I first drank this whiskey, I couldn't really do it, and now I actually
don't mind. It's so sweet.
It is quite sweet.
It is scary.
The more you have, the easier it gets.
Yeah.
And the nose, it's like you can't put your nose into it because there's just so much like volatile alcohol in there that like I can't smell anything every time I try to dip my nose in. It's just like out.
Yeah, that's like, I wonder, I don't know if I've got any super strong ones here. This one's like 57.5. I've got some 60%ers knocking around somewhere. Oh, actually, this one might be. Yeah, 61.7, this one.
I drink a lot of schnapps like my family makes, and like a lot of that sort of 70 or 80, and I can put my nose into it. I don't know what it is about like that style of like, I guess it's a distillation process as well, right? Like, you know, you get a kind of a bit of a dirty wash and a bit of a shitty whiskey, and it's a lot more sort of burny on the nose. But yeah, I don't find it when I put my nose into like a schnapps or something, the sweetness sort of overrides it. But when I do cheap bourbon or just like some rye whiskies as well, it just takes so long for me to get used to that nose before I can start getting into it.
Yeah, sure. Like there are some whiskies that are just a bit, just a bit, I guess have a heavy burn more than others.
Yeah. So Jonny, I mean, we've spoken a bit about wood, but like, what if I was going out to buy, say, 3 whiskies that were going to show me what the differences in oak would be? What types would I be looking for?
So I think like if you're going to boil, I'm going to talk about Scotch whiskey here again.
Yeah.
And let's.
Otherwise it's too wide, right?
Yeah, and I think it's the easiest style of whiskey to find these variations. So Japanese whiskey will be the same, but if you're getting like single barrel Japanese whiskey, it's just so expensive. So it's easy to talk about Scotch. So I would recommend, like, the 3 types you probably want a heavy sherried whiskey, a bourbon matured, or kind of like bourbon maybe with like a tiny bit of sherry influence, but like let's say it's mostly bourbon. And then the third one you'll want is a peated whiskey. And I think Glendronach is the best bang for your buck for sherried whiskey. Like Macallan is obviously the king of sherry, but again, you're just like, the prices are so crazy these days. So Glendronach is your easiest route in for like a heavy sherry, like 100% European oak, full sherry maturation. Pretty much all of their whiskies are full sherry. I think it's Oloroso for their 12 and 18, and their 21 and is just PX cherry, and then maybe their 15 is like Oloroso and PX cherry mixed together. So it's all sherry, and it's basically varying intensities of sweetness. If you're going to go for a peaty whiskey, I would recommend Lefroy 10 is like the most common and probably most popular one, right? It's like I guess on paper it's the most intensely peaty, but Ardbeg is pretty much, I mean, like this, a similar level. And I would recommend Mackay Bay from Kilchoman, which is like a much younger distillery. It's a non-age statement, but it's really good actually, Kilchoman. And I guess it's an easier access point as well if you want to look for any single barrels. Like Kilchoman do loads and loads and loads of special releases, single barrels of various styles, and you can pick them up for around, so like standard whiskey about 40 quid a bottle, single barrels about I mean, like from 80 to 120. Like they're actually pretty cheap. I mean, for like special releases.
So talking about non-age statements, just because you brought that up there, like how do you sort of stand on that as well? I know that's kind of divides whiskey drinkers and stuff about the non-age statements. Are you more for that sort of, you know, if it's 18, it has to be above that sort of thing? Are you more for, you know, allowing blenders to blend across and create a style for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the non-age statement thing. I guess it depends. Like, there's a market for everything, right? So, like, if you're looking for a sort of cheaper whiskey but it's quite nice, non-age statement means that you can get like something that has, you know, maybe quite a lot of old whiskey in there, but then some young whiskey as well to pad it out. So, you know, if you're not, you know, if you're just looking for something decent to drink, not flashy, then non-age statements, yeah, it's great. There's plenty of good ones. If you want to, you know, like if you want to get into the secondary market and like making money off whiskey, then non-age statement's probably not going to do it for you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So when we spoke about peated whiskey before, just run me through that process. What makes a whiskey peated?
Well, okay, so you can pretty much separate like the old blends from the East Coast and West Coast. East Coast tended not to peat, and the West Coast did. Similarly, like if you basically cut Scotland into like, you know, you take a cross in the middle of it, the Northwest are most likely to peat. So you've got the Hebrides where you didn't have any coal, so your fuel was going to be peat, which is basically like a 5,000-year-old bog that sort of dried out, and you go and dig out.
The heating for the malting process, right?
Yeah. You're going to use this fuel. So like you don't have any coal, so you need to have fuel to basically start a fire. So you go, and this is for your house or wherever. You're going to go and cut a big peat bog and take like bits of this earth out. And it'll be like, you basically, like, let's say you cut this deep, it'll be kind of in 3 stages. And your top bit is what you're going to use in whiskey production. The stuff below you'll use in, like, for your fire at home or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the top, you get a sort of looser, rootier style of peat. And you're going to take that off to your distillery. When you process your barley to make your whiskey, you're going to basically soak it to try and germinate it at the very beginning. So you want this is the malting phase. You basically want your barley seeds to start germinating. And there's a point at which you want to stop this germination. So you've got this sort of wet, warm, moist barley that's starting to sprout little roots. To stop it, you basically want to heat it up and dry it out again. So you put it in a kiln. So if you're in Edinburgh, or, you know, let's say 200 years ago, you're in Edinburgh, you've got coal coming out your ears. Edinburgh is like so coal rich. So you could use coal, and it doesn't really impart that much flavor onto the barley seeds that you're drying. But if you're in Islay or on the West Coast in the Hebrides somewhere, and you're digging up your peat, and you're using peat to stoke that fire, which then goes up to dry the barley, little bits of that smoke are going to go through you basically have a perforated floor that your barley sits on above the fire. Mm-hmm. The peat smoke's going to go up, and at the very beginning of the drying phase, when your barley's still quite moist, it's going to basically cling on to the barley, and you get this really smoky flavor. So even before you do anything else in the process, you can pick up that barley in your hand, you can smell it. So if you go to Bowmore or Lagavulin, Lefroy, wherever, and you smell the barley they use in their process, it really smells of smoke, or like medicinal peaty smoke.
Yeah, but the same with that beer that you had first on there, using that same malt to create that beer, and it has all those sort of elements.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So this is basically like peated whiskey malt used to make a beer. I am interested to know whether they're going to take some of this beer and distill it. You think they'd be fools not to?
Once you add hops into it, let's say, because you'll do that to make it a beer, it then becomes not a whiskey. So
yeah. I don't know actually if that is, if the SWA restrict that. I do know that in Japan, Miyashita Jozu made like their first ever whiskey was made on their shochu kit. So it was like a stainless steel shochu combi still. And they distilled hopped beer, and then they matured it in cognac barrels. And that was their first attempt at whiskey. Kind of cool. Didn't taste very nice.
When you're a new whiskey country as well, like doing those sort of, having the ability to do those experiments where, you know, you look at Irish whiskey, bourbon, like those rules are so tight around what you can do that it kind of, you know, it's difficult to do anything else other than, you know, playing with the maturation or playing with your fermentation at the start or even playing with the still and those sorts of things. But when you have the ability to start going through, but like I've distilled some things with hops, and it's so difficult to distill with hops. Like the oils and the process of that distilling is just, so difficult to get consistent and to not clog everything up and to not make it
right.
really like weirdly fragrant as well. I'm really impressed every time I have a hopped whiskey, let's say, or a hopped distilled whiskey. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, that's the only one I've tried. There are a few knocking around. Yeah, it seems like, so nowadays, I guess the most common thing, especially if you're a new distillery, is playing around with either different barley varietals or different yeast strains for your maturation, for your fermentation. Sorry, that seems to be the best way to there's not many ways to differentiate yourself if you're a really young distillery.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're talking about sherry finished whiskey. We talked about peat. Was there another one?
Bourbon matured. So bourbon matured whiskey. Well, I mean, the thing is that it's the most common, right? So you can pretty much, I mean, like 90% of the whiskeys that you'll find in, the supermarket are going to be largely bourbon matured.
And that's why bourbon barrels are cheap.
Basically,
right?
If it hasn't got a statement about what barrel it is, it's likely to be bourbon.
Yeah, and it'll be a vatting of everything, but predominantly bourbon. So, I mean, most of the whiskey that most people have tried, whether they know it or not, will be bourbon matured, largely bourbon matured. So it's kind of hard to recommend because they're all good. I do have this here, which you're not actually able to get this anymore, but they did a second release. So this is a Compass Box, which is an independent bottler.
Yeah.
They did this for Delilah's, which is like a rock bar in Chicago. And the idea was to get a blended whiskey, so it's malt whiskey and grain whiskey blended together, and to try and make it as bourbony as possible. So it's like virgin oak and recharred oak barrels. So even if you get like an old bourbon barrel that's been used before, you kind of scrape it out, like scrape off the kind of layer that that has already been used. So you try and get down into the fresher wood, you rechar it, and you sort of use it as new, which is it does work, but the issue is that by that point,
as well.
Yeah, the issue there is that you make your barrel very thin, and so I guess like for maximum intensity of flavor, you want your whiskey to be soaking like right into the depths of the barrel and coming back out again. Yeah, so if you've got a barrel that thick, then like you're going to get this really, really juicy, really vibrant interaction. But if your barrel is like that thin, and so if you're listening to this on audio later, imagine I had my fingers wide apart for the first one and close together for the second one.
And that also leans into different types of oak as well. So different types of oak have, are more porous than other types. Like American oak is, that's probably a good question to go through as well. But, like Hungarian versus French versus American, it allows that sort of integration into the wood and back.
Or as we were watching that video from wherever it was, different types of wood that are not oak.
Yeah, and there's like
we have a lunchtime YouTube watching. I can't remember which was the distillery in Ireland that we were watching.
Oh, we were watching. That was Jameson's.
Yeah.
So and like talking about like sherry finish and like I love Irish whiskey, and I think it's just I don't have a sweet tooth, but I have a sweet tooth for whiskey. And it was the same thing. I grew up loving peated whiskies, and that's when I went out and thought I was 18, 19 drinking whiskey, and I was the coolest kid getting around. They're like peated whiskey was the best, and that was it. But like the Redbreast 12, which is a sherry cask Irish whiskey, is like 40 pounds a bottle. And like for me, I could drink that every day and enjoy it every single day. It's just such a nice whiskey. But using different types of wood gives different flavors, and like using cedar and stuff like that. Even apple wood, I know in some American style whiskeys using like apple or maple wood as well.
Chestnut used to be pretty common in Scotland before it's now banned, but you can find it at the back of some warehouses. There are probably still a couple knocking around. Sorry, say again?
Do you know why it was banned?
I think they just wanted to regulate and streamline. I don't know why they went for oak and banned everything else. I think they just wanted to say, let's just draw a line somewhere.
Yeah, they had to draw the line in the sand somewhere.
Yeah, I'm interested to find out from you guys, your mead barrels. So I remember speaking to you guys before about maturing whiskey in mead barrels, and because at the time, I don't remember. Glen Murray had just done a cider barrel.
Yeah.
There was a Kashi in Japan had done tequila. Someone else did a tequila barrel in Scotland. I don't remember who. But they've now banned. So that now tequila is allowed in Scotland. You can now mature whiskey in that. But cider, they banned it. You're not allowed to do cider matured whiskey anymore.
So we've sent some of our barrels off to mature. We can talk offline about what it is, Johnny. We sent it off. When was it? Last February.
Yeah. So we're almost up to 12
almost
months.
up to 12 months, and so we're just waiting. They're not massive barrel. One was they're smaller.
Yeah, they're small barrels, right? So
we should get kind of the findings back from that, just to test out. So that's quite exciting because there definitely is a flavour.
Yeah, because I remember she like.
Have you been trying it like as it goes along, like at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
It's not here, Johnny. The master distiller has been trying it.
Yeah, and we get a little report every sort of 3 to 6 months, going like, where's it at, and one of the barrels as well that we sent off to. One was a standard beef barrel that we run through, and these were virgin barrels as well, so they only held mead. And then our smaller barrel was a virgin barrel that held a mead distillate, and then held our 18 vintage.
Yeah.
And that's the only one that's come back, and they're like, oh, that one there's got this weird sort of like cloudy participant in it because of the honey was so raw that it left wax inside the barrel.
Okay, yeah. Does it go moldy if it's that sweet as well? Like, is there? Do you get any like mold or mildew or anything like that?
No, because but when you barrel age, usually you run it bone dry in the barrel. Like the fermentation still runs, and we're not really holding a sweet mead in the barrel. So by the time that sort of runs through, there's no residual sweetness. It's more of like that perception of sweetness and that honey character.
Okay, right.
But yeah, it's quite an interesting little process. And I would love to be able to taste it through there, but yeah, I don't think we
we don't have the access to that. Yeah, there was a plan to come to the distillery.
Yeah, I know.
For a visit, but
any excuse.
Has put paid to that. But yeah, Johnny, I think we should definitely talk about some mead-aged whiskies in the future. That'd be a really cool project.
Yeah, because I know they banned. They were saying that they banned cider, but because mead doesn't kind of come into that category, you can still sort of wait until that gets banned.
Yeah, they haven't banned it yet.
Yeah, they haven't banned it yet. So yeah,
that's good.
Cool. I mean, Johnny, we're getting towards the end of it, but I need to restock my whiskey cabinet this weekend. What shall I be like? Give me an interesting whiskey I can pick up at a supermarket for about 40 quid. But
interesting whiskey at a supermarket for 40 quid. I would say it's quite tricky. So, I mean, to be honest, I think around that price point, people tend to do the same thing. Like everyone's trying to do a very approachable whiskey. So really, I think like you can just lucky dip and it'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
I would recommend like if you're so let's say you're in London, there are a few places like Milroy's or Cadden Heads, or the Whiskey Exchange or the Vintage House on Old Compton Street. They will, if you go in there and you say I've got 40 to 60 pounds, they'll probably find you something quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll be stuff that's limited and like it won't be there the next week. And that's when it starts getting interesting, is when you find stuff that like you're not able to taste again, single barrels or like limited expressions. So if you're a complete novice, I'd say just go into the supermarket and literally just take like, I would say first time go and take a Glenmorangie, Lafroig 10 and if you can find it Glendronach, but I think you'll find it difficult to get that in the supermarket. But then you've got like 3 totally different whiskies.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. That's kind of what we're looking for. Johnny, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate you coming.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. And we'll speak to you again soon, I'm sure.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Enjoy your weekend.
You too.
But yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks, Johnny, for coming on. That was interesting.
Yeah, I think we overestimated how much we were going to talk about wood. But
yeah, we just ended up talking about whiskey, didn't we?
Which,
yeah, I think it's always hard, right? Because we love booze. Both, and I'm happy to talk about the intricacies of booze. But yeah, wood's wood. Right?
I actually quite enjoyed that whiskey, to be honest with you.
It's better than drinking better. So the reason it's still in the back of my cupboard is because it tasted really corny, as in of corn, when I first got it. But looking at it, I got it in 2010, so
aging it at home.
Yeah, it has had some time on.
Yeah,
and some oxidation, right? Because it's probably been about half full, that bottle. So
it's been it hasn't really been barrel aged either, so it doesn't really probably have the oxidization it does, but also allows a lot of those volatiles to come off to opening and closing, pouring that out.
Yeah.
But I had a little bit left in the bottom of that when I poured that hacky on the top, and it's strange.
Oh. So whereas this is a nice combo.
Yeah, and I think they go together.
Yeah.
Like you've got some of those characteristics in there, and you know, having a bit of barrel contact in that boucher sort of lends itself to a decent cocktail as well. Like I think I'll play a little bit with that.
Yeah,
I'd like to kind of use a you know, create an espresso martini that
Oh,
doesn't make
yeah.
you sad.
Right, and on that note, guys, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, sounds
We'll catch you again next week.
But yeah, cheers guys.